worked on games and pretty much knows what they're talking about when it comes to games. And I'm here to tell you that a lot of those things don't exactly map one-to-one when you start moving into VR. But it's all good, it's all good, it's still great experience, it's still great fun. But you'll see in maybe some surprising ways why it doesn't always work out. Doesn't always work out. Your keyboard. That doesn't work either. Hey! Alright, so yeah, talk by Trowers, age 52 and 5'6". So first, a little bit about my second favourite subject, me. My name is Alex Trowers. I am a designer, predominantly systems, but I've done a bit of everything really. I'm a designer from the late 1900s. It sounds better when I say it that way, and more depressing at the same time. I've worked on console, I've worked on PC, I've worked on mobile, I've worked on VR. There's not a platform I haven't worked on, there's not a genre I haven't worked in. I've worked for small teams, I've worked for big teams, I've worked for absolutely tiny teams, I've been a solo dev. I have some pictures of some of the places that I've worked, and you may recognise some of them, and some of them are really obscure. One of them's only in there because its initials are FFS, and I thought that was quite funny. They're called Flaming Foul. They did Gloomhaven. They did a PC version of Gloomhaven. They're pretty cool. But yeah, that isn't in any kind of order, and I haven't listed all of the places that I've worked, but that pretty much runs the gamut. I have more slides about me. I've worked on work-for-hire titles. I've worked on original IP, and the two are, it's a very different state of mind you get into when you're working on either of them. I've worked on award-winning games. Some of the games that we used to do, certainly the Bullfrog stuff as well, we used to just collect awards by the bucket load. They're incredibly popular, everybody loved them. And then I've worked on games that were so bad. Well, we still shipped them, but God, they were terrible. And thankfully I had the foresight of removing the name from the credits so it doesn't sully my Moby Games profile with that. I've been made redundant twice. I've been sacked 3 times. And yeah, they still ask me to do these things. So, right, a little bit on VR and what it isn't. Some of the misconceptions, some of the easy stuff. That people kind of get wrong or think it is and whatnot. It's not something you just add in. By that I mean, hey, you're working on a first-person shooter, and then somebody goes, well, you know, because the view is the same, why don't we just put VR in? Like multiplayer, it's not something you just add on at the end. It's something that you need to craft, and you need to craft early doors because of all of the other restrictions and stuff that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. It's not suited to every game. Like I said, funnily enough, first-person shooters, if you just shoehorn a bit of VR in there, they don't actually work very well. And there are some genres which VR is just going to be terrible for. There are some genres which VR is incredible for, amazing for. It's absolutely brilliant. You can't just go, oh yeah, you know what, we'll court the VR dollars and we'll just throw that one in. It's not very accessible still. And I put it to you that like the single biggest issue with VR is the barrier to entry. And that's everything. That's everything from the hardware you need to run it to, and the cost of that and everything, to, oh, I just fancy a game of this. Oh God, I've got to get the headset out and I've got to put that on and I've got to wear this thing and I've got to carry that around with me and actually I've got to clear the living room and all sorts of stuff. So in almost every sense of the word, it's not very accessible at all. Nor is it the next big thing, despite the fact that loads of people like me will come to you and say, VR is the next big thing, this thing is incredible, right? And there was an awful lot of tech bro cash behind it and everybody betting on this. And every year is the year of VR. No one's said it for 2025 yet because they've said it for the last 10 years. So maybe now they've realized, maybe it isn't. But what is it? Well, it's pretty cool actually. I like it. I'm a big VR fan, as you'll no doubt see in a bit. It can be incredibly immersive. In fact, there's no game medium more immersive than VR when it's done right, okay? It's fantastic. The sense of presence you get, the sense of scale you get, the sense of immersion is phenomenal. You've got to do it right. So, about this actual talk now. The talk is basically going to consist of essentially two slides. That's it. And first, I'm going to talk about meat space, which is our fancy VR term for this, your environment, all the stuff around you and everything. And then I'm going to talk about the design considerations and the things, the problems that you're going to run into when you're actually trying to make a game for VR. There are going to be anecdotes. My preferred method of communicating is, hey, let me tell you about the time where I did so-and-so, or I met whoever, or we did this thing. That's going to be the format. And it's anecdotes all the way down, I'm afraid. Right, meat space. Those are our kids, both playing in VR, having tidied the living room to make space for it. Spoiler alert, that wasn't quite enough room, and that is not tidy. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, do you have enough space? And obviously so much of this is contextual, so much of this depends on what is it that you're trying to make. If you're trying to make a room scale game, you need some room. If you're making a cockpit-based game, you don't need as much room as you think, but you still need some room. So the most fundamental problem with a lack of meat space is you're going to hit things. Now, for the first anecdote, I'm going to take you way back to the very early Bullfrog days when we were in this tiny little office above a hi-fi shop. And it was so crowded up there. There was, I think, 7 of us in this one room. And everybody's chair backed onto somebody else's chair. And so if you turned your chair would hit their chair. And people used to literally fight about this. My chair backed onto Peter, Sean backed onto Glenn, and those two were always fighting each other. Fast forward several years, and I'm working at a place called Rogue Sun, and we're making a VR game. And it's a really cool VR game. It's a cross between parkour and Wing Chun. And so you're there, and you're running, and you're climbing things, and you're punching guys. And we're in a co-working space like this, where, and let me tell you, finding a co-working space that is suitable for VR, very tricky indeed, where again, our chairs are backed onto each other. So every now and again, somebody would get up, push their chair back, stand up, start spinning around doing this. That doesn't end well. I don't care how you sugarcoat it, that doesn't end well, and you do end up punching your co-workers in the face, which is frowned upon. Right? So there always needs to be enough space. Even if you're making a game where it's a seated game, where you're sitting down and you're pressing buttons or pulling levers, you're sat in a cockpit of something, I guarantee you, your desk is in the way. You're working on it day to day, work, compile, headset on, controller up, and I need to pick that thing off the, bugger, I can't reach the thing, it's under my desk, right? Always make sure you've got enough space. I mean, it sounds obvious and silly, but you will be amazed at the little things that literally get in the way. And getting into the build. Now, who's made games for things that weren't the thing that they were making it on? So, consoles, mobiles, things like that, right? Any handheld device. When you're in Unity, Unreal, and you're making a PC game and you just hit the little play button and you're playing it, brilliant. When you have to deploy to a device, it's another barrier, it's another bit of a pain. And anything that increases the time to me trying this thing out that I've just made makes the game harder to make very good, if you see what I mean, right? And you'll either not make very quick progress because you're deploying every time, right? Or you'll wait until you've done a whole bunch of stuff and then you'll deploy, and one of those things will have broken everything and you can't work out which one it was. So either way, it's not a particularly good system. That is exacerbated by VR, because putting a headset on and off is an absolute pain. And this is, you know, I've still got to get the cable, I've still got to get everything, and I've got to have the headset on, and oh, is the headset actually working, and was it charged, and so many things go horribly, horribly wrong with this. Wrong device. The act of wearing a headset. Who here, maybe I should have opened with this, who here has tried VR in some form, played VR in some form? Who's got their own kit and uses it at home? See, it's a tiny fraction of a tiny fraction, right? How long do you normally spend in a VR game?
Hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah, and that's, I would say that's at the high end for a particular experience, right? Your working day is what, 8 hours? And you've got to wear a headset for 8 hours? That's not to say, hey, look, we're going to dev with this thing on. That's just, most of the time what people end up doing is they leave the headset on their head and just tilt it up like that, or put it on the top of their forehead or something. These things aren't like, that's hella uncomfortable, right? It's another thing to consider, but it is easier than, hang on, where did I put it? Oh, it's over there, let me get it, and I've got to adjust the straps and get it all on and everything. It's a pain in the backside. So what I would suggest for that is, like the longer you can keep your game pancakeable, i.e. just 2D and playable on the screen or in the engine that you're building it on rather than needing it on the device, the better from a work neck injury balance, right? Cables. Even if you're working on a wireless headset, chances are to deploy to the device you need a cable on it. Headsets with cables, I'm fine with it. I'm okay with that, but it's another layer of problem. And again, this first reared its ugly head way back in the Bullfrog days, funny enough. In the first wave of VR, I say wave of VR, it was more of a ripple. There was a device called the VFX-1, and it was really cool because it kind of looked like a Star Wars Rebel pilot helmet. And it gave you 3 degrees of freedom, so it would pick up on your pitch and roll, but it wasn't room scale or anything like that. And we were making a game called Magic Carpet at the time. Anyone heard of that? Some people, and some people are shaking their heads. Oh man. Yeah, so we're making the game Magic Carpet, which you'd think from the outset is a pretty good fit for VR. And they sent us a couple of VR helmets and said, could you support this? And we went, yeah, sure, we'll give it a go. And not knowing any better, we just plugged it straight in and got it working as a replacement for the game camera. Now in Magic Carpet, you have control of your little dude flying around on a carpet, and it's like a first-person shooter. So you've got your motion like that, and you turn the mouse to turn the character and fly off in a different direction. And all we did was map the mouse to the headset, so I can pitch up and down, and I can look left and right, and my character would spin and do stuff accordingly. Brilliant, easy, ship it. The problem was that in Magic Carpet, and in a lot of first-person games, a lot of the shooters of the time, you would end up doing this thing called circle strafing. Everybody knows what that is? Here's my target, and I'm going to be shooting at him whilst moving around in a circle, constantly shooting at that guy until he's no longer there. So I'm constantly turning, and I'm constantly turning, and on about the second rotation, you get strangled. And that's when we realised, that was the first thing that we thought that we knew, that, we didn't think about that. The cable isn't suspended above our heads. It's not on a spinny thing that we actually have to worry about serious physical injury and asphyxiating while playing Magic Carpet. I'm not saying there have been no news reports of that, but it's not something we specifically wanted. So yeah, the cables, they're a pain, and in some cases, deadly. What does this all mean? I don't know, where did I get to? Fatigue, yes. Right, so the crux of this, with the constant either wearing the headset the whole time and flipping it up and trying to use the pass-through mode. Don't try and use the pass-through mode and look at the screen, it's horrible. The picking up the helmet, picking up the headset and putting it on, the controllers, everything. It all adds up to fatigue, and you will get burned out on a VR project a lot quicker than you would on a regular one, simply because of the physical nature of it. Right? And there's no real way of avoiding it other than, like I say, try and keep it as pancake as possible for as long as possible. That's the main That's the main issue with meat space. Happy with that? Cool. So, how does this affect what you're doing, or how you're going to spec out the game that you're going to make? This is by no means an exhaustive list, and there's going to be stuff that I miss, but we'll see how far we go. The first issue is motion. First issue is always motion. The single biggest design constraint of VR is locomotion, and no one has solved it yet. Or no one has solved it for all of the cases. In games where you're sat in a cockpit, so driving games, flight simulators, Elite Dangerous is not a problem at all. Those things are fantastic, so well suited to VR. I love Elite Dangerous. That's going to come up again. In games where it's room scale and you've mapped the space that you're in to the game world, again, it's not a problem. And I walk over here and I stop before I get to the wall because there's a wall in the game, and it's like I don't hit the wall. I'm going to walk over here, and there was a fantastic, what was the name of that place? Void something. Oh, it's called The Void. And they were like an installation-based VR company, and I think they did two. They did a Ghostbusters VR and they did a Star Wars VR, and I did the Star Wars one, and it was fantastic. It was just in a shopping centre in the middle of London, and they had a tiny little space with, like, I'm guessing 2 or 3 rooms maximum, and you walked in it in VR, and they mapped everything to these rooms, and then they'd done some really clever stuff with, I've walked into this room, and oh, I'm on the surface of this planet, and then the shuttle has landed behind me, so I've walked into this room, and I'm in the shuttle, and we've taken off, and we've flown around, and we've landed somewhere else, and I've walked back into this room, and I'm in a completely different planet, and I think I've travelled the universe, and I've only moved back and forth between 2 rooms. It was really, really well done, and the mapping was superb. If I reached my hand out and touched the wall, there was a wall there. And it was really weird, because again, we were all VR devs, and we were like, this is odd. This is really cool, but it's really, really odd. And at one point, they're like, get your gun. And we're like, where are the guns? And there was a rack over there with the guns. And we were like, okay, let's get the guns. But they're not going to be there. Oh, bloody hell, I've got a gun. And literally, we're picking up the thing because it was one-to-one mapping. Perfect. Motion, not a problem at all. Every other game where you have to move from point A to point B, huge problem. Huge problem. Most of the time, we get around it with teleportation. And teleportation is a thing that most people are comfortable with, but it's a bit of it's a game thing. So, you know, what should be a fantastic strength of VR, i.e., remember when your grandma got a hold of a Wii and you said, here you go, play tennis, and she was like, oh, tennis, I know how to do that. Massive strength, and you can totally do that in VR. Suddenly, we've undone all that good work by saying, right, so to teleport, what you need to do is hold this button down, aim over there, and then release that, and then you will snap to this position, and off we go, right? It's fine if you're an experienced gamer, but that language is really, really tricky, and it's very, very hard to get other people involved and invested in it. So the only other way is the smooth movement stuff, and that sucks. And it's really bad for a number of reasons. But anyway, if I'm trying to move from point A to point B, or I want my character to move from point A to point B, and we're doing it in a pancake game, we're doing it in either a first-person shooter or a third-person action adventure, to make the character move there, we always, we do some kind of velocity, we do some kind of ease in, ease out, right? He will accelerate to the maximum speed and then slow down when he reaches the end. Because if we just do it linear, it feels weird and horrible and cheap and nasty. The opposite is true in VR. If you have that acceleration and deceleration, the player throws up. If you move it linearly, he may still throw up, but it will be smaller. You feel a lot more comfortable if it is like absolute movement rather than this momentum-based stuff. The other interesting thing there is it's not all equal. So forward motion is okay. It's rotational stuff that really throws people out. So if you can make your game in a straight line, it's a lot easier. But yeah, so that was something that kind of caught me by surprise, because a friend of mine was making this game, and it was teleporting between these points, but they would do a transition between the points where you would fly along this line. And I was asking him, well, why is it just, moving linearly, and he said, well, we tried it the other way, and it looked smooth, but then everybody just felt ill. I didn't know. Make it linear. Ergonomics. This is my fun one, and this is why it's upsetting that Dave isn't here. So remember that parkour kung fu game I was talking about? Climbing in VR is a solved problem, right? We know how we're going to climb in VR, and everybody does it the same way. There's some sort of grey area around how you rotate around a surface, and there are several different ways of approaching that. But for the most part, it's I reach out my hand, I grab a hand hold, and then this hand becomes my point of reference, and wherever I move that, I move relative to that handhold in the world, and it feels very natural. It's a very, very cool thing. Right, solved, brilliant. The fighting bit that we were doing, the punching stuff, that actually, with one small exception that I'll come back to a bit later, that actually worked really, really well. And let me tell you, like punching those, even like the basic Unreal Engine mannequins, punching them and having them do all of this stuff in VR felt fantastic. I mean, if obviously you're a naturally violent person, it will feel brilliant. If you're a pacifist in any way, then it probably felt terrible. But it was quite a satisfying thing, and again, it was relatively solved. And so we put all of that together. We had a system whereby the parkour was arranged that you would always only ever run in a straight line. So you weren't using a joypad to move or anything like that. It was the act of you swinging your arms would make your character run. And if you wanted to jump, you'd do that. You'd throw both your arms up in the air and your character would jump, and then you could grab things and everything. And it felt really natural, and it felt really, really cool. So I made this level, this sort of test level, where you'd run down this alleyway, you'd beat up this guy, and then you'd climb up the drain pipe here, and then you'd be on this roof, and then you'd slide down the zip line, and then there'd be a wall that you had to climb up to fight the guy at the top, what have you. And I needed it testing, and I passed it around to all the guys on the team, and I said, let me know what you think. And everybody came back going, yeah, this is brilliant, it's really exciting, that felt really good, I loved it. The funny thing was when you did like get up to the top, and you climbed up onto the ledge. By the way, the transition from climbing to I'm now standing on the ledge, that's also really, really tricky, just you know. But you did that, and then you look back down and you're like, whoa, okay, I'm really high up. No, you're not, you're on the ground floor, but boy, do you feel really high up. Anyway, everyone loved it. They thought it was fantastic, except for the art director, hated it. And he was like, I don't like this, I can't play it. And we're like, what the hell are you talking about? And at that point, I realised that the art director is about 4'2". He couldn't reach the first handhold. And so he's just stuck at the bottom of this alleyway, jumping, going, this sucks, Alex, I hate it. And all we can see is this tiny Scotsman getting more and more irate. Anyway, and that's when I realised that, I've got to take actual real-world ergonomics into account. Never had to do that before. Normally, you run up to a thing, you press the climb button, and your guy starts climbing. Not anymore. Can you reach the switch? Can you actually find the lever? Is it under your desk? Oh God. So the way we got around that is we mapped the character to a 6-foot person and normalized everything. So now Dave was really happy because he got to experience what it would be like walking around if he was actually reasonably sized. But again, that was a tricky thing to do because now we've got to worry about calibration. Because the only points of reference you've got in VR are you've got the head and you've got the 2 hands. Unless again you start layering on, I'm going to get these other tracking devices and start strapping them to my feet or what have you, which again, barrier to entry and the niche of a niche of a niche of people are going to have those, so it's probably best not to rely on that. But we had a similar problem at another game we were doing, at a different company we were doing, where we need to know how tall the player is and how far he can reach. But you don't really want that extra barrier of, right, before you play this game, we're going to have a calibration screen where you've got to stand there like this. And, you know, so we can measure how far this controller gets from your head. So what we came up with was, anyone remember the original Halo? And the bit of just absolute pure genius at the start of that, where they're like, right, we're going to calibrate you, look up. And whichever way you move the joypad, it would look you up. So even if you were an inverted mouse player, invert Y player, it knew straight away because you put in the command you wanted for lookup, right? And nobody ever realized that, hang on, I didn't go into the settings and change that. It was brilliant. So we kind of aped that. And what we did was, we said, grab this thing, will you? And we'd hang a thing above their head. And as you reached for it, it would get pulled away from you until we knew that you were reaching at your maximum extent, and then we'd go, okay, that's how tall you are. So we would do that, and then we would use those numbers to scale the person accordingly. It worked pretty well. But yeah, in much the same way as you want to get feedback from a very diverse set of people, suddenly you've got to include short people. The next problem is embodiment, which is a really interesting issue, because on the one hand, you can have this, like for the most part, VR games do, I'm a floaty head and a couple of floaty hands, and that's brilliant. And in all honesty, it works better in 90% of the cases than we've fully mapped a skeleton. We've fully mapped an entire character, so you've got arms and you've got legs and you've got a torso. Head, torso and hands, that works too, because you just hang the torso from underneath the head somewhere, and generally speaking, that's all right. Again, if you're sitting in a cockpit, it kind of works because you're normally strapped in quite tight and it's okay. But this is to go back to Elite Dangerous. Is anyone familiar with Elite Dangerous? Again, you're in the cockpit of a spaceship, left hand is on this throttly thing, right hand's on the joysticky thing, either side of your chair, and you're sitting in the chair and you're holding onto that. And I've got a HOTAS set up, so I've got the joystick and the throttle and everything. It's brilliant. But my joystick and the throttle was all kind of clipped together in the middle. So my hand is here, and my other one is there, and my character in the game world, his hand is over here, and the other one is over here. It may seem like nothing. It may seem like this is something I'm just getting wound up about nothing. But my elbows started to tingle, and my forearms were tingling, because the information my eyes were sending weren't matching the information that my body was going, right? And something somewhere started freaking out about it, and my arms started to go a bit numb, I guess. I don't know, it's very, very hard to say. So that's the first issue. That's the only issue with embodiment. Once you can get around the technical stuff, there's the only issue with embodiment. If the thing that you're displaying doesn't match what it feels like you're doing, it's a bad feeling for the player. It's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it's bad and it's something to be aware of. And obviously, like motion sickness and everything like that, people will have different thresholds for this. But it's, yeah, be aware of it. So likewise, when we were doing the Wing Chun stuff, Wing Chun, by the way, if anyone's done, has anyone done martial arts? Has anyone done any Wing Chun? Wing Chun is a very kind of unique martial art, and it's very, you're all tight in and everything is here, so your elbows are in. It's not like, right, I'm out, I've got a nice big wide stance and I'm swinging big punches like this. Everything is like this. And we're doing that, and our avatar, this elbow is going anywhere because it's all IK. And again, as soon as you throw that punch and your arm's up here, it feels weird. Or as soon as I hold my hand up to block, I hold my arm up to block, but my arm's like this, and then they've actually managed to punch me because it hasn't connected with the avatar, I feel cheated. So embodiment is it's a thorny thing to get into, and here abstraction is your friend. If you can make do with head, maybe torso, and a couple of hands, brilliant. And players feel much more at home with that. I think if anyone gets a chance to play Half-Life Alyx, which is, it's basically the only AAA VR experience, I would say, at the moment. I think there's a bit in that where they have the developers' commentary about why they did not put in the full embodiment of the main character, and it was just floaty hands, and your brain replaces the rest of the body and it feels right. Resources. What did I go here? Variable timing. Right, so this is a theory of mine. And it's just a theory of mine. But, and I'm going to come back to you in a bit. I feel that the player has a very finite time resource in VR before they go, that's enough VR for today. And normally it manifests itself in motion sickness. Normally you feel a bit queasy. And you'll hear it referred to as your VR legs. Thankfully, it's something you can build up. Like the first time you try it, maybe going for 15 minutes or so, then even if you still feel fine, take the headset off, touch grass, do whatever, then come back later. Did I use that right? I don't know. Anyway, it is something you can build up a tolerance for, but it is still there. So the way I like to envisage my players is they've got this resource, which is a finite amount of time that they can be in VR doing VR things. So the last thing they want to be doing is wasting that resource. Because as soon as they tap out, they're done with that game. And there's another thing which I believe is going to be my next point. But yes, so you've always got to be very respectful of this time. Who here is familiar with yellow paint? Yes. For the love of God, use yellow paint in VR. For this one very simple reason. I've appeared at this crossroads. Down here is a door. I need to know if I can open that door, or am I going to piss away some of my resource? Teleport, teleport, walk a bit, teleport. Ah, this isn't something I can interact with. Ah, I've got to go all the way back, right? And I have just wasted all of that very precious time where I could have been doing cool VR stuff. So I need to be able to tell at a distance, that door's got a handle. That handle is here. And let me be clear, doesn't have to be yellow, right? But it has to be something that the player can tell at a distance, that is something I can interact with. The design language of this world so far tells me that that is a door that I can, in my current state, go and open. And it doesn't have to be UI, it can be diegetic, it just needs to look natural, it needs to be recognizable from distance so that I can spend my currency to go and open it, right? I can't stress enough how important that is and how many people kind of get that wrong. And it also means like, because so many times you'll enter a space and there'll be a big control panel there. And only one of the buttons will be usable, or one lever will be usable, and the others are cosmetic. For the love of God, call that one out. Because all the while my hand is going through the thing and not doing anything, it's breaking my immersion in the game world. I mean, in an ideal situation, make them all usable, fantastic, but ooh, that's expensive. So be very, very respectful of this player's resource. Because as a VR developer, I think we've got a shared responsibility, right? Sometimes people will go, I don't like this game. I'm trying to think of a game I don't like. I'm going to say Halo. I do like Halo, let me be clear. And so they'll go, I don't like Halo. And they won't play Halo. Fair enough. But they might play COD, or they might play Fortnite, or they might play some other first-person shooter. With VR, the first time they get ill, they go, I don't like VR. Or even worse, they go, I can't play VR. The reality is, no, you can't play that one, but there's a whole ton of other VR games that you could play, but people won't even countenance the idea of playing it because that one game made them feel ill. So when you are making a VR game, you've got to ensure that you do everything in your power to not make the player ill, because that's going to ruin them for every other developer's VR game, right? And that's like a lot of, that's a scary thing when you stop to think about it. Yeah, there's this shared responsibility for that. It does kind of amaze me that there isn't necessarily a community resource where everybody's sharing these best practices. There's some, but it's not everything. And maybe as a group we could do more for that. But yeah, just the idea that it's not just me, it's everyone else, and we're kind of in this together. Because we want people to play VR. I'd love it if VR was the next big thing. Anyway. Right. That was all of the things that I wanted to throw at you. But obviously we're all game people here, it's an interactive thing. So now is the time if you've got any questions. Oh, this, by the way, that's Bullfrog early 90s, I think. And for the record, not my worst haircut. But yeah, if you've got any questions about VR, or back then, or anything like that, then now's the time.
Quick round of applause, because that was awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the tree.
Hello, lovely tree. I could probably stand right behind the tree. Hello. There's a lot of things about ergonomics and lots of things like that, but I was thinking about in terms of like scale, but it could be about like inclusion. Is that a thing to, well, obviously it's a thing to consider when designing a game or something, but could you expand on that in a way? I don't think when you talked about the other things, they were slightly skating on the topic of inclusion, but they weren't specifically like...
Skating works, by the way. Skating is
Yeah.
But actually, right, yes, so, on inclusion, and given all of the issues that I mentioned about locomotion and the problem, so if you're sitting in a thing, the locomotion problems go away. You have in your hands, by the way, touch controllers, so the ones that come with the Meta, are some of the most fantastic controllers you will ever use. You literally kind of forget you're holding them. I put it to you that that's the only reason they put these little straps on, is so that you don't just drop them after a while because you don't even realise they're in your hand. They are magnificent ergonomically. So what if you, for example, you designed a game where the protagonist is in a wheelchair? And literally the way you move is you grab the wheel and you push. And then I've got turning because one hand's doing this and the other one's doing it the opposite way. I've got moving forwards, I've got moving backwards. There's a whole raft of things you could do there where you design a game about how this person in the wheelchair gets around. And then I bet you it's going to be even more eye-opening about, oh my God, we can't put this in. Or that door's not wide enough. Or that slope's too steep. Or who put a step there? Right? And suddenly we're viewing the world in a completely different way thanks to the power of VR.
Yeah.
But you see what I mean? So yeah, there's a whole ton of stuff that we can do that is, if not outside the box, it's certainly adjacent to the edge of it. And people aren't necessarily doing that because obviously funding is a whole different story.
Yeah, I was also thinking about when you talk about yellow paint, and that as a visually disabled gamer, that is such a huge thing for me. Visual like inclusivity and knowing if I can interact with that or not. Not just the resources, just being able to see, is that an openable door? Do I walk that way? Where do I go? Because sometimes I just get completely lost.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And even before VR, even before all of this, I have a whole bunch of very important rules about gameplay, but that's not the subject of this talk. One of my very important rules is if it looks like you can do a thing, you should be able to do that thing. And I hate it when I'm walking down an alleyway and there's a door and it looks like a door, but it isn't a door, it's just a flat thing that they've gone, well, there should probably be, we didn't want just bricks all the way down, so we'll put a door there, and you're like, I can't open that door, what makes that door special? And I can't tell at a distance. Side note, slightly different rant. You're picking colours for, this is a good thing, this is a bad thing. Why is it always green and red? Why? 1 in 10 men are red-green colourblind, and dogs will never be able to play the game. But it costs you nothing. It costs you nothing to just pick a purple and a blue, or there is tons of literature out there for these are acceptable for colours for people with these particular issues with their eyesight, right? And it costs you nothing to make that decision, and yet everybody goes full green, full red, and it just is a waste of time. Why?
Yeah. Well, thank you, though. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, different rant entirely, but anyway.
Any more in the room? We do, just quick while I think about it, actually, we had one on YouTube, which was, what do you think of the current hardware? You mentioned the Meta, the Quest handheld.
Right, so I'm rocking an OG Vive, and it's great. It suffers a little bit because of the particular style of lenses, so you get a bit of what they call the Fresnel effect with the lenses. It's a little bit weird, but modern day hardware. I was very sceptical, by the way, of the Quest when it came out and their inside-out tracking. It works magnificently. It's witchcraft as far as I'm concerned. And I've even done it, like the first time I tried it, I think was at Development. I'm sitting there and there's loads of people walking by. So the background is just moving the whole time. And it was rock solid the whole time. And the quality of the screens with the OLED screens and everything is getting better and better and better. The hardware is fantastic. It weighs too much. It's a bugger to put on. And boy, it makes your face sweat. I didn't know my eyeballs could sweat, but apparently they can. And it also leaves you looking like you've been skiing for the last 3 hours, right? So there's a whole bunch of other issues with the hardware. The technical stuff of the hardware, especially now, it's incredible. And again, when I look back at the stuff we were doing in the 90s, and obviously it's not comparable because it was only the 3 degrees of freedom rather than the 6, It's just chalk and cheese, the stuff now. Even like the old stuff, even the vibes and the DK1s and stuff like that, they're still really, really good. But like an Index or a Quest 3 and the PSVR 2, again, brilliant, really good quality hardware. And like I said, I've already said about controllers. I'm using the Vive Knuckles, or the Index Knuckles, which it's got a strap around the middle part of your hand, and it's got cap sense for all of your fingers. So you can do this, and to a greater or lesser extent, it can be read as my individual fingers are doing that. So that coupled with being able to model that accurately in the wall, so to pick up this thing or to flip someone off or anything like that, it works really, really, really well.
I just wanted to ask, because you mentioned about ergonomics and proportions, and obviously with some VR games you just have a head and arms, for example, and things like that. I was curious what your thoughts on like massively online or massively multiplayer VR games are, in which you may see other characters who are a head and arms or moving in slightly janky ways that may kind of bring out the immersion, and whether you think online kind of has a place in VR.
Online absolutely has a place in VR. The last VR game I made was it was Ghostbusters for Endreams, and again, one of the easiest pitches to be involved with ever. It's multiplayer Ghostbusters in VR, and everybody kind of knows what you do there. You run around with your mates, you get the proton pack out, you throw the beam, and you know you're wrestling this ghost, trying to get him into the trap that's on the floor, and superb, right? And you're doing that with your mates, and they're all running around, and they're fully embodied and everything, and it worked really, really, really well. If you look at something like Gorilla Tag, where it's just a torso and hands and arms, and it works really, really well as well. And we play one of the best games you can get in VR at the moment. It's called Walkabout Mini Golf, and you are a head and a right hand, or a left hand if you're a lefty, but you get one hand and you get one head, and it is superb. It's superb because your brain fills in all the gaps, and you'll see somebody, and literally all you can see is their head and a hand, and they're making a putt, and you can see their head follow the ball, and you can see the ball miss, and you can see them, or you can see, yes! Or you can see it when they've accidentally hit the lampshade, or you can see all of those things because of the one-to-one mapping of what it is they're doing in their space. Now, there's a whole bunch of scope you can do with the asymmetry of scale, and that's really exciting too. There are a bunch of games, or there's one game, I don't know the name of it. The guy in VR is a giant. He's a giant and he's overlooking this play space, and everybody else, I think they're on mobile. They've got their mobile version, and they're a tiny little guy running around trying to shoot the giant. And the giant is smashing the terrain, and he's grabbing them with their hands and then yeeting them off the play area, right? It's fantastic, it's really, really good, and you play with that mismatch of scales. But that works because if you try to do that all VR, so these little guys running around are also VR, the minute they get picked up and they're being dragged around like this, like if you want to win the game, you just grab someone and do this, and they'll be like, I know, I'm done, right? So it only works because of the split medium there. One of the other games I pitched when we were at Andrews and we were doing Ghostbusters, they wanted to do some MR stuff. The rules for MR, the mixed reality stuff, completely different to the rules from VR. There's a whole bunch of stuff you don't have to worry about. But anyway, one of the things we wanted to do there, or what I wanted to do there, was, if you start off with MR, there's a house, a mansion, haunted mansion in front of you, sitting on the table. And you can, if you want, go into VR and then walk through the front door and explore the mansion. The other players, who are all in MR still, can lift the roof off the house. And now they can see you walking around in VR. And maybe there's something they can do in their MR space where, oh, I've got this item, here you go. And then you, in VR, you see this big hand coming down with the thing, oh, thank you very much, I'll take that, that's the key I need to open this door. Right? That's exciting. That could be a really, really cool game. Yeah? And playing with that discrepancy of scale and having people with the different roles. But you do have to watch for, this is another thing which could probably have been a slide. It's not called intrusion, what's it called? Everybody has a sense of self, a sense of space. If you stand too close to someone, they freak out. Yeah? And for everyone, that sense of space is different, right? In VR, chances are you're not going to collide with another person. Because if I'm trying to walk somewhere and then my avatar stops and I'm still walking, I get pulled out and I feel ill. So you've kind of got to let them go wherever it is that they want to go, right? Doing that to another person is a problem, is a real problem. And you do see it in some of the online stuff where, especially obviously if you've got a female avatar, you'll get men coming up and all you'll see is their head here. And it's like, dude, what the hell, right? So there's a whole bunch of ethical issues with this that I'm sorry I don't have the answer for, other than to keep everybody in their own space. We've made games before where it was you had your own bits, like I'm working on this terminal, or I'm working on in this zone, and I can't get to your zone, but I can still interact with you, because I can take this thing and you needed a red one, here's a red one, there you go, have that, or putting it on this and I'm going to pull this lever and it's going to send it to you, and we can interact that way, and we just sidestep all of the problems of, dude, you're standing in my eyeballs, right? But yeah. Sorry, did that answer your question in any way?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, that's very, very interesting.
Cool, James.
What do you think needs to happen for VR to be more widely adopted around the world? Because it is still a bit niche.
Barrier to entry. The headset has to feel no worse than I'm wearing a pair of glasses. It needs to be that easy. Let's assume that we solve the tracking things, let's assume, but it's I have this thing that weighs quite a lot on the front of my head and the battery life's poor and I've got to charge it and I've got to get all this set up. The uses of VR go so far beyond games it's not even funny. It's incredible. In fact, the first modern VR thing I made was a game, because I'm a game designer, and if you ask me to design something, it'll end up being a game. But it wasn't being sold direct to an end user. It was being sold to big corporations as a team building exercise, right? These big corporations have very big budgets that they can use for this sort of stuff. You can make an awful lot of money if you put yourself forward with a technology, as I'm sure we've all seen. If you can speak knowledgeably about some tech that some other rich person doesn't quite understand, you can get a lot of money out of it. Anyway, so we would go to these big companies, we would set up a space with 4 booths with the VR setup and another with the sort of a controller setup, a pancake. We would invite the managers to bring their teams down, and the team members go in the VR. And the idea was that this base is, an asteroid is going to hit this base in 10 minutes. There is a rocket ready to go with an escape pod that fits 4 people. You just need to fix it first. And everybody is making components to put in the rocket. And these components are coming past on conveyor belts and you're assembling them, and who's got a number 3 resistor, who's got a thingy board, who's got a gas tank, and there's loads of different items, and you're passing them around and you're fixing it, and then you're going into the escape pod and you're slotting these things in, and junk, and right, I've locked that in, that bit's good, and then, oh, the power's gone out, right, somebody needs to go and reset the breakers, and how well does your team communicate that, and how efficiently can they do it? And the manager is sitting there with a gamepad, and they can talk to the people, or they can choose to turn the power off, or disable the conveyor belt, or make rocks fall from the ceiling. By the way, that's terrifying in VR. Stuff falling near your head, oh, that's horrible. Anyway, they've got full control over all of that, and they're watching their minions run around doing that. And at some point, as soon as the rocket is in a working state, you can launch the rocket. As soon as your part of the rocket is in a working state, you can launch the rocket and leave your teammates behind, right? So we put all of that stuff in, and people were loving it, people were playing it, and they were also learning a lot about their colleagues and who they should trust and who they shouldn't trust, which was hilarious for us. And then you swap it around, so all the people who were in the booth who were going, push the button, turn the power off, now get to go in there, while the other guys go, oh, that was you? Right, give me that button again, yeah? So that, and I think it did quite well, but it wasn't an end user experience, it was marketed as something completely differently. A friend of mine is working, and again, he's in games for nearly as long as me, but he's actually working for a medical firm, and they're doing remote surgery in VR, because the VR gives you that 3D perception, it gives you that sense of scale, and you can pinpoint things way more accurately than you can if you're just looking at it on a flat screen, right? So they have surgeons in Australia able to operate on somebody in the States using the VR and controlling a robot at the other end that is one-to-one mapped to what the guy's hands are doing here. That's brilliant. You're not waiting for the guy to arrive at the hospital. He's wherever he is set up, and he's got the setup, he's doing his thing, and he can churn out loads of these operations in multiple different places, right? So it's stuff like that, which I think is fantastic. Safety training. Like if you're trying to learn how to use heavy machinery and not decapitate yourself or your colleagues, why not do it in VR? Where it could actually be quite fun to decapitate your colleagues. But you do that, and nobody's hands get crushed, nobody's heads come off, and you learn what all the buttons do because it's all accurately mapped. You're not selling that to an end user, although I'll tell you what, JCB simulator I might be quite interested in. But yeah, so there's a ton of space for it outside of traditional games. But you can totally, if you move into that, you can totally bring all of the gamification stuff that you already know and stick it in that, and I encourage you to do so.
We could take one more. Is there anyone behind the tree or no? Any more? No? Cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, that was phenomenal. Thank you very much, Alex. That was brilliant. So another round of applause, please. Thank you. Cheers. Very much. Okay, so quick intermission. We'll go grab a quick drink and then we'll crack on. So just so we're all aware, Mel has to give her doggy some medication at 8:45. Is it? Yeah. So we'll just fire off quick, give us some medication, come back on. Potentially, yeah, cool. Okay, but yeah, let's go grab some drinks and then we'll come back in about 5-10 minutes. Cool. Okay. Is that okay? say pause again. It's such a good way to do it. Because I found it. It's already good. I was starting paying attention to it. Where you you're like pause a lot. It's like So you work with, let's say, Oh, okay, I'm thinking something different. Sorry, yeah. Thousands, if not millions, of AI-generated songs, put them onto Spotify, and then was getting pennies on each one, but being like an absolute mint because he was getting all the So it's interesting that it's a company that's done it themselves rather than wait for regulation. Like, that's the sort of thing you can imagine just coming down from on high and being like, that's the rule. You make it on. It's interesting that a company just take it. Yeah. Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine it. But yeah. Oh yeah, the plugin. Yeah.
So he's interested in that
Yeah.
So circle partnership.
Yeah.
How does partnership work? So basically,
She's kind of like an inclined to being like, give a bit of time and energy to like make decisions and things like
kind of personality.
So one thing that I was thinking, we've been discussing recently is that, as I said, we do the like bring your own games events, for like any developers and things to bring stuff to show off. So it'd be really cool to get student showcases involved. And so actually like run student showcases for SAE, for Warwickshire College, for Warwick University, and that sort of thing. So I might be interested in doing it here, and actually getting them out, getting our community of game developers to play their games, getting them shaking hands, saying this is what we've done, and actually doing it as a bit of a student showcase with the industry. Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I do, yeah. So, there's a conversation. That's what we're doing with the student showcase. It's really cool to get. We have 1,200 local game developers in the community, and so we put events out to all of our and obviously getting like 50 to 100 to be able to put students in front of those people. So yeah, I think we run game jams as well. Maybe we could do a partner game jam as well to actually get students. In fact, I think a couple of students have done a game jam before. But if we actually made it an official thing where students mixing with industry and being on teams with industry, we could say each team has a student or something like that. That would be really cool. It's one of them, isn't it? Yeah.
When I went to Korea,
that's it. Right, what do you know? I was just about to say, do you do like joint events and things like that? Because the game jams that we ran, the first one we actually ran it in the fold, and then we started to run them online as well. So we could potentially do like remote game jams. So people like say if they are in like Korea or Australia or whatever, we actually do like a global thing. Do it on the same day, pick a game jam. Yeah, I was going to say, give us a shout out. Yeah. license notes, you can just change it from sound design in games and film, so it might be helpful there as well. I'll introduce you on LinkedIn. Yeah, she's just done a load of facilitating a deal between Epic and make Fortnite, and they just released Ultimate vs. Com, and someone did all the sound design for that through her. So again, like someone good to know, you might be able to provide people to come and do lectures or whatever. Right. No, that's great. I'll like I say, drop us a message and then I will see you on meeting. Drop on meeting. I know. If you search for it'll be a message on there. They're more active. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Sounds good. And then we'll communicate by email. Yeah. That sounds good. Wicked. Oh yeah. Nice to meet you, mate. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, we're already thinking about like game 2, like what do we turn on?
everybody. Hello. We look like we're missing a few people actually, so if you're not here, put your hand up. So, a couple of things just before we get Someone has left a car key in the toilet, and we don't know if is it yours? There you go. No worries, that was ace, yeah. So you have trouble getting home with that. That's panic mode, yeah, that's always me. And then also, it's a little bit late now because you've probably already been and everything, but just while people are talking, the toilets, obviously there are toilets here, but just while people are talking, if we can use the toilets around the corner, if you go around, turn left, and you go in. They are unisex, so you might just get confused if you walk in there and there's other people in there, but they are all individual, so it's all good. Cool, so that's the bit of housekeeping. Other housekeeping, it's not really been a problem, and I doubt it will be a problem because it's so cold and probably wet and stormy and everything, but we can't take glasses and things outside, and we have to be quite quiet as we're going out and things like that because of the licensing rules, so just after the talk and everything, once we make our way out, please don't take any glasses and things out if you're having a chat. Yeah, other than that, we're good to go with Mel, who's going to be talking to us about intellectual property ownership and sharing some hot tips. So, oh, we don't have your dog. I was going to introduce your dog as well.
Mania sitting right there.
But yeah, if we can give a nice big warm welcoming round of applause to Mel, please.
Okay. All right. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm here today going to talk about intellectual property, how you can protect it, especially as an indie developer. You're out on your own, you have limited resources, you don't have lawyers who can protect you like all the big AAA studios out there. Also, I'll be talking about contract tips, so if you do have publishers, you're negotiating with a publisher, you already have a publisher. One of the problems that I always constantly see whenever I have a client come through is they have a problem where they have a copyright infringement court case coming up, or they signed over all of their intellectual property, or they're fighting with their publisher. They just did not read the contract. So if there's one thing that you guys leave tonight with, it's just read the fine print. I know we're all guilty of that. We all sign subscriptions. We don't read the TMCs. Pretty sure Google had something about a zombie apocalypse comes out. So just an introduction of myself. So my name's Melissa, that's Nanya. She's the legally blonde, I'm the legally brunette. So we're originally from South Africa. We were in the video game industry in South Africa for about 9-10 years, and we immigrated to the UK to get more involved in the industry here, and also, I mean, it's a better, safer life. I don't know if you've heard of South Africa, how much crime there is, but just to put in perspective, there's 14 video game studios in South Africa alone, where here there's like probably 8,000, I don't know, there's well over 10,000 video game studios, so more work here in the UK. I'm a qualified attorney. I've qualified in 2019. I've worked in the gaming industry also since 2019. Been in both worlds. I've kind of have one foot in the door in law firms, one foot in the door in a video game studio. I've worked for companies like Landfall, 24-bit games, Talent Digital Arts. They were previously called Teutonium. So I've worked on various games. I've made board game for a charity company that focuses on gender-based violence and child trafficking in Africa. So I've seen everything, done everything, learned so much, and the one thing that I have learned is people don't know anything about intellectual property, how to protect themselves, anything about contracts, or reading the fine print. They get themselves into trouble quite a lot. So the first thing I want to touch on is why you should always protect your IP and retain it, especially when you're dealing with the publishers. So IP, if you look at a house is built of cement, wood, stone. It makes up the whole component of a house, the building of the house, the structure, the foundation. The same can apply if you want to start your own video game studio, or you have a game title that you're working on, you want to publish it. It's pretty much the same thing. A video game is made of intellectual property, purely. It's just patents, copyright, trademarks, trade secrets as well. I mean, we've all seen what's going on here with Nintendo. Nintendo's always constantly going after the little guys and suing them for any intellectual property infringement. So if you have also intellectual property that is protected, copyright, if you want to register in the US, for example, trademark registered, things like that, you do look more attractive to investors and publishers. And I know these days, because of how bad the economy is and the gaming industry has imploded, I think this is the third cycle that we've had since the 80s, where we've gone through a cycle of distraction where all of us are just going through mass layoffs. This is not a new thing. This is the third time this has happened to our industry. And the one way that you can actually attract more investment is by protecting your IP, because they can see that they'll be able to recover their costs, they can maximize the value of the game and further potential opportunities like game merchandise, music, other artwork. And also for you, it's kind of being able to manipulate a business deal to go into your favor. So it just creates a more professional vibe, and it shows that you actually know what you're doing, you mean business, and you are very passionate about your game. Clicker, work. Okay, so I'm gonna try really hard not to bore you guys, because I know it's like quite late, and law is just a very dry topic. So I have tried to make the different types of intellectual properties, specifically UK, because intellectual property worldwide, it works differently. You register things differently. Every country has its different way of handling and registering intellectual property. But so far, the first thing is patents, and patents is very rarely used in gaming. It's only if you have very unique gameplay mechanics, like Shadow of Mordor, for example. Warner Brothers has patented the Nemesis AI system, and they had it registered in 2021, which is essentially just, they have a bunch of forts, and AI is involved with every single fort. Works with the character, so whatever the character's decisions are, it learns from the character. And the only way that you could create something similar to that is if you work around it, which is what Ubisoft does with Assassin's Creed, where in, for example, Odyssey, when you kill someone, you have a mercenary coming in to come after you and hunt you down. So that also is how they worked around that Nemesis AI system. So for patents, the length of protection that you have, it's a maximum of 20 years, but initial is 5 years. From the 5th year, you can pay to renew it every single year, up to a maximum of 20 years. It gets increasingly more expensive. You're kind of looking at a range of between 1,000 to 6,000, sometimes 10,000 pounds just to register a patent. So if you want to register a patent, it's only if it is a core business plan where you create different hardware innovations, or you are creating development tools for specific game engines. That's the only time that I would recommend that you patent if you are a very smaller studio. Coverage of protection it's medium, it's quite high. I mean, we've seen so many court cases happening right now where there's patent infringements, and we'll talk about that later, but it's becoming a problem in the video game industry, specifically with all the indies wanting to create things. They suddenly get a nasty letter in the mail or email to say you're infringing a patent, we're going to sue you if you don't stop development. So it happens quite often. With trademarks, this protects the branding of your game. So your game title will have branding to it, your video game studio will have a brand to it. You want to protect that, because more often than not, you will have other companies popping up who will try and copy you. Like, we've seen a lot of that happening for artists on Temu. if they don't properly protect all of their artwork, even though it's really hard to, it always gets copied by Temu. Specifically China. China seems to create a lot of knockoffs of games, and they copy off the trademark of another game studio. So you really have to think about protecting yourself there. The length of protection is immortal as long as you pay for the renewal fees every single year or every 10 years. So to register a patent, for the one category, it's roughly about £200, and then it's recommended that you also register the trademark for every single category. There's different categories that you can choose. You can choose books, music, publication, technology. It's best to register every single category you possibly can afford. It's quite expensive. I do get that not a lot of people will want to do this yet, but there is one way that you can protect yourself, and that's just by putting the symbol TM at the end of your gaming title or your gaming studio to say that you are going to be publishing, you're going to be registering the trademark. You haven't done it yet, but you will be doing it, and it is protected. The coverage of protection is quite narrow because, as I said, there are a lot of copycats, and a lot of times people will copy a piece of work, or like your gaming title or gaming studio. I worked for a company where one of the problems that we had was trying to figure out a gaming title that would not infringe Dragon Ball Zero, because I think they named it, I can't actually remember what they named the title, but it was very, very close, so close in how they named it. Dragon Punch Force Ball Z. Oh. I'm gonna have to interlude and pause to actually give this dog your heart mates. So, 1 second. Sorry, Narnia. Here you go.
Sorry about this, everyone. Is this the best way?
Yeah. Okay, that's so easy. Her heart mate just tastes really, really good, like a treat, so it makes my life easier. So yeah, the game title was eventually called Super Force Dragon Ball 3, and it sounds very close to Dragon Ball Z, but it is not very close. It is similar, but not close. So there's a lot of times where people say that their game title, their game studio is similar, but it's different. So you kind of have to make it distinct. So that's why the coverage is very narrow. You're not going to be able to protect everything for your game or your studio. You are going to have a lot of trademark infringements. And then you have trade secrets, and this is the most easiest, cheapest, and it's essentially just if you have a clientele list, email subscriptions that you've got of everyone. If you have an MMO, for example, and you've got a subscriber list of all the players, that is actually important. You should keep that very secret because you can actually sell it to your competitors for a lot of money. And if they get that list, they can get access to those clients. So keep all your trade secrets under lock and key, and this is all your development processes as well, because they can use those development processes and cheat and steal your copyright, steal your ideas. So keep everything secret, do not blab. As coverage of protection, snitches get stitches. So copyright, this is one of the widest coverage of protection. It's really difficult making video games when every single idea that you have, it's bound to infringe someone else's idea. And an idea is just that, it's just something in your head. To make it copyright protected, it has to be written down on a piece of paper. It has to be, if it's source code, written in your editor. If it's a video game, develop it, concept art, draw it out, everything has to be time-stamped. And I believe that there is a company here in the UK, because copyright protection is automatic. But in the US, you have to pay to register to protect your copyright. So if you are looking at international distribution of your game title, then you would need to look at international protection. And the best resource is the World's Intellectual Property Office, and they can do like international registrations. Very expensive as well. So if you are maybe looking at if you gross in about 100,000 downloads a month, or you're making more than £100,000, then it's worth looking at paying for international coverage. But one of the issues that we had is when the creator of the copyright dies, then the protection lasts for 70 years after his death. But how do you keep something protected for longer? And the best way to do that is to actually get a lawyer involved to write up a will, and in your will, the next of kin will be getting the copyright, and they will be the next creator. So the copyright will last for their life, and then 70 years after that. So that's one of the best ways to actually keep your copyright protected. I believe that, I think it was for the Mickey Mouse character, the really old one, old creepy mouse character, that is no longer, that one, no longer protected, so you can actually make video games based on that very creepy mouse character. But then Pac-Man is protected until 2035, so you can never make a video game that looks very similar to Pac-Man. So, I mean, you can after 2035, but most likely the lawyers will get involved and do something to protect it even further. So before you actually publish a game, before you talk about it, advertise it, you have just got the idea, you've written it down, or you started developing it, don't talk to anyone about your idea at all. Not even your dad or your mom or your friends, no one, until you've actually done these few things, if you can. So with patents, and I'm going to say this because if it is a core business plan of hardware innovations and development tools, and you're building a game engine that you can later on sell, then look at patents. So before you actually pitch your game or talk to any publishers or investors, just speak to a lawyer if you can, if you have the funds for it. There are a lot of lawyers who help smaller indies in this country. I know Wiggins is actually quite expensive, but I know a lot of top law firms, they do have plans to assist. So far, for registering a patent, there's the European Patent Convention that prevents anyone from registering a patent for software, so anything that is like the unique gameplay mechanics. That is a lot harder in the UK and Europe to actually register than it would be in the US. The US is relatively easy to patent, but just it's more harder in Europe and the UK. They have a character design test to see if the mechanic is very new and it's innovative and it helps people's lives, and they have a whole entire test that takes about 4 years for them to test it out. And I think by that time someone else will have already created something and someone else will have registered, so it's you kind of have to weigh the cost. Do you really want to patent that gameplay mechanic? So during the time that it takes to do the pre-filing investigation and paying lawyers and dealing with in the US you have the US Patent and Trademark Office, in the UK you have the UK Intellectual Property Office. They're going to take 4 years to register your patents, and they're going to take those 4 years. During those 4 years they do pre-file investigations. They have to compare it to every single patent or every single thing that's on their desk, and they have a lot of applications in a day, so it's very expensive, very costly. And even if you add patent is pending, it's not guaranteed that you're going to have the protection. So someone could still copy your idea. You're not likely to get protected unless it's actually registered and granted. So for trademarks, as I said, protect all your brand elements like your studio name, your logos, your game title, any very unique catchphrases. there is a doctrine in UK law, laissez-scenes is what it's called, I think. Might need to double check that, but what essentially means is that any phrase that is used in everyday life cannot be protected. And that's like once upon a time, for example. That can't ever be trademarked or copyright or whatever. So if your trademark is not registered yet, what you could do is use the symbol TM at the end of your game title or your studio. But once it has been registered and the trademark is granted, then use the R symbol, which is the reserved rights. Trademarks, like I said, lasts incredibly long, just as long as you remember to renew their fees. And you can actually ask the office to remind you, and they have a grace period of about 9 months. So if you forget to pay your fees, they give you a grace period of 9 months just to quickly pay that fee. But like I said, it's every 10 years. Trade secrets, like I said, don't formally disclose this in public ever. So anything that you get a business advantage, just keep it under lock and key. If it's all on your hard drive, just have a backup to the backup to the backup to the backup. And in South Africa, we have a joke of this because electricity, we have power outages all the time. And normally in a video game studio, sometimes we wouldn't have a backup generator. And you'll know if you're on Unity and your computer crashes, there goes all of that stuff that you saved, all of that information. And also your hard drives malfunction because of power outages, especially if it's connected to your computer, then there's a power outage, goes on the fritz, there goes your backup. So always have a backup to the backup to the backup to the backup. I think South Africans learn to be very resourceful because we always have a backup to the generator and a backup to the generator's generator and a backup to that backup just so we can have power. So learn from South Africans, always have a backup plan. Copyrights, it's, as I said, automatically an idea once it's written down or typed out. For concept art ideas, always timestamp it. Always save everything. The early work in progress, any ideas like that, always save it. You can, I think, as I said, there was an organization, I forgot what it's called again, but I will try and remember. You can contact this company in the UK and they just timestamp everything for you for a certain fee. I think it's like £50 to timestamp a bunch of documents, and that will be legitimized and you will always be protected for that specific work. So how to protect your IP when you're actually pitching to a publisher or an investor. So publishers and investors, they always want to limit their legal risk to their exposure to legal risk. And when I say limiting their risk, they don't want to be sued. So if you have a game idea and actually it's a copycat of someone else's idea and they already have a trademark on that idea, if the publisher has signed a contract with you for that game, they're gonna get sued as well. So they want to limit that risk. So more often than not, they'll already have a lawyer who will have non-disclosure agreements, and it will be unilateral, so it won't be in your favor. So one of the things to do is actually to ask way in advance of your meeting with your publisher, like way in advance, not the day of, not the day before, not 2 days before, literally like weeks before if you can, and just see if they would be open to signing a mutual NDA. And don't download a mutual NDA off the internet, please, for the love of God. So many people download it off of Etsy, off of random websites, and I can't tell you how many times that is just, they've used AI, ChatGPT. Everyone's been using ChatGPT, and I promise you, 99% of the time, it's wrong. So always speak to someone. If you have a lawyer friend, speak to your lawyer friend to just go over this mutual NDA. And if you have resources to speak to your lawyer and get a proper mutual NDA, you can also speak to the lawyer at the same time, get a unilateral as well as a mutual NDA. The reason I say not last minute is because for lawyers, we have to review the documents, we have to draft the documents, we have to negotiate with each other, and that takes an incredibly long time. I've once had to negotiate a contract for about 8 months, and that was a very arbitrary contract. It was for a very small, minimal amount of money, but it was with 2 big companies, and they have a lot of resources, a lot of lawyers, so we were constantly fighting because no one wanted to find a mutual ground. So it takes forever. If you have a really, really complex business plan or business idea, it can take a while. So always request this way in advance. And then, as I said, you can also ask your lawyer at the same time to just draft an NDA that is unilateral specifically for your gaming studio. So if you have contractors, freelancers, work for hire, make sure you include the NDA in there, and it will protect all of your intellectual property. Make sure that anything that a freelancer or contractor works on, that IP belongs to you, unless it's a collaboration deal, in which case then it would be a mutual NDA. And yeah, of course, always read the fine print. So what is a strategy for small indies? And these are one individual or very few employees. You've got limited amount of resources. First thing you're going to do is any copyrights or any products that is commercially available or you want to make commercially available, copyright protected. If you're looking specifically at the US, then I do recommend that you register the copyright there. For the UK and the EU, it's automatic. You can get time stamping. The US is called the US Copyright Office, which is different to the US Patent and Trademark Office. Then use the TM symbol on every game title and logo until you eventually get your trademarks and all the extra categories registered. Another thing is once that trademark is all registered, use the R symbol to make sure that, triple sure that you will be protected and no one can steal your stuff. And then if they do try to steal stuff, you can get your lovely lawyer to send a letter to say, if you don't take this down, we will sue you. It's not fun getting those letters, so also try not to step on anyone's toes. Keep all studio trade secrets under lock and key. And before you hire anyone, make sure that they sign an NDA. Before you share your idea with anyone, even your friends, they have to sign an NDA. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I have had a client whose idea got stolen by their friends, and now they're making millions where this guy is stolen idea's gone. Then if you are looking at international protection for any of your intellectual property, it's not likely for a small indie company, but if you're looking for more distributing your game overseas, it is a good idea to always look at registering IP and protecting it, because if you make the game here, you register it here, it's only going to be protected in the UK. It's not going to have protection in the US or Japan, for example. Registering the patent is unlikely unless it's actually a core business idea. This is the strategy for larger companies, so this probably would only apply if you're actually making a lot of money, but you could see the perspective of AAA studios. They do all the previous strategies mentioned for protecting their IP, but they go the extra length, and they look at international trademark and copyrights protections and patents. They will also register more than one trademark category. So they will register the domain names, for example, various different domain names. Like for Agile Owl, for example, I can't have agileowl.com, so you'll have the agileowl.com or agile.net. So you buy they buy every single different domain, so no one ever steals that or faces off that title and pretends and makes it out like that copycat is actually my company, for example. And this, you could actually trademark for derivative works, and derivative work is quite a hot topic, which is a huge topic on its own for intellectual property, but essentially, if you wanted to make spin-offs or parodies of your game, in the US they have a doctrine called fair use, where someone could take a snippet of your game and create an entire parody of it, and that is okay, because it's just fun entertainment. In the UK, you can only take a snippet of someone else's work if it's for educational purposes. It's very narrow. And also, it's used as a defense tool in a court case or litigation. They hire third-party IP monitoring companies, and those are specifically guys who will target or use small indies and send you letters to say, stop infringing on our copyright or trademark or patents. So that's those guys, these like huge guys will be hiring a whole arsenal of team to protect their intellectual property. And they also build a patent portfolio, which is why we're coming to Powell. Yes, we all know what's going on with that company. So why would you want to build a patent portfolio? So it helps to monetize your portfolio to look more appealing to licensed partners. It's also a friendly negotiation tool to attract more collaboration partners. It's also used in court case as an offensive and defensive tool. An offensive tool, it forces competitors to pay a license fee. Otherwise, you will face going to court and potentially closing your company down and losing all of your money, because these guys they have loads of money. So it's like David and Goliath essentially, except no one wins. Then defensive tool. The larger the portfolio, the more legal resources you have, the meaner you look, and the more intimidating. And most of the time, a studio will actually build around a patent instead of actually going head-to-head in a court case. Also, you'll have the ability to do counterclaims. So if someone says, oh, but you are infringing my patents, then that company can go around and be like, oh, no, I'm doing a counterclaim, like you are infringing on my patents, and there's like a whole entire fight that happens. But coming to the Powell debacle, so interestingly enough, Pocket Pair, they announced the developments of Powell in June of 2021. Around the same year, Nintendo and the Pokemon company registered their parent, the original patent, in December 2021. So they filed an application, I believe, actually after the Powell's development was released. So then, they decided, oh, we need patent to be registered. So only in December 2021 did they register for patent protection. And this is specifically the patents where you throw the Pokeball and it catches the creature, and then you can ride those creatures, as well as your creature, you throw the Pokeball at an opponent, and the Pokemon's supposed to attack that opponent that you aim at. Powell, they claim that they did not know of this patent when they got this letter. They say that we were trying to build around it, but I mean, we all know for me, when I play Powell, I call them Pokemons. I call Pokeballs. It's confusing. And that's also where I say copyright and trademark, it has very limited protection, especially trademark, because if it's very distinct, it seems like trademark infringement. And it seems like trademark infringement. I mean, these creatures, this looks like Pokemon. I mean, you can't tell me that these creatures don't look alike. So yeah, Pocket Pair decided that they're gonna lawyer up, and now they're going head-to-head court case. And one possible reason I can think that they're actually doing this, when they know they're on, gray area, like murky water, is that they're trying to create a situation for future devs where our creativity, flexible creativity, is not going to be impaired. Because if the judges actually vote in favor of Nintendo, the Pokemon company, it means that we as indies are now going to be very limited in how we create and develop things, because now we're potentially going to have to get a lawyer to help investigate if we are indeed infringing on anyone's patents or trademark, and try not to step on anyone's toes. So we're going to have to be very careful. Our legal costs are going to go up, and we're constantly going to get letters to say, oh, you're infringing my patents, my trademark, my copyright. But so far, what I have seen, what Pocketpay has done was November last year, they did a patch update where now the Pokemon creatures, you don't have to aim the ball at an opponent for the creature to fight, the creature appears next to you. The companions the companions actually stand next to you when they're released. Still, you're using a ball to catch the creatures, so it's going to be interesting. It hasn't been finalized, but watch the space. Okay, next is, I kind of feel like I actually should open the room for questions, because that was a lot of information, and I'm sure I just overloaded your brains. Do you guys want to start questions now for this, then go to talk about contracts?
Can I ask a quick question? You know something about Nintendo patterning the mechanic? Oh, shit. Oh, sorry guys, I didn't know everybody, I swore, sorry. You were saying about with the Nintendo patterning the game mechanic. They went on that, and what stops some complete beep going off and start trying to pattern the idea of first-person shooters and elements like that, and then that, next thing you know, the whole game industry as a whole is up a creek without a paddle.
So to answer that, patents is extremely difficult to register. There are a lot of checks and balances that they have to go through when they do a pre-file investigation. So the likelihood of a first-person shooter or any type of game that is currently out there is very limited. So if it's already out in the public, you can't register the patent for it, which is why the PAL World situation is so contentious, because the Pokemon games have already been out there since the 80s. So how can you claim to patent something that's already been out in the public? So to answer that, if it's already out in the public, you can't patent the idea. And a lot of companies or a lot of gaming studios have already developed on an idea for a long time. You can't patent it. A good example would be Mud, which was developed in the 80s. It literally built on the idea of massive multiplayer online games. That idea can never be patented. Mud actually was developed as an educational game for the guys when they worked in university, and then eventually they took it and just developed it further. They didn't protect it with trademark or patents or anything, because it was already out in public, it was already used in a university environment, so you could not register a patent for it. Not that I think they had the funds for it. But when you are trying to register a patent, there are ways that you have to have a lot of proof to say that your gameplay is original. Your design is very unique and it's not been done before ever. And there are three types of patents. There's utility, which is manufacture, or a mechanic or some machinery that is unique, or design is some artwork that is significantly unique, or some sort of design that's significantly unique that no one has ever seen before. Or you can use everything, which is design and the machination, utility. So to patent something, like I said, it takes 4 years, and the reason it takes 4 years is because they have to look at all of those things. They have to look at whether it is innovative, whether it's unique, and that comes in the problem, because during those 4 years, who's to say that your idea is not going to get stolen anyway? So that's why it's very rare that a company does patent, unless they're Microsoft or Ubisoft or any of the big guys, or Nintendo, who seems hell-bent to sue people. Okay. Anything else?
You gave me a microphone again. Well, I've got two things. One is, I'll get the anecdote out of the way. To show how seriously like the big companies take this, when we were BlackRock, who were owned by Disney, they had a bounty on patents. And if you could go to them with a mechanic that they thought they could patent, you got a monetary reward and a little trophy. And that's how seriously they were. So for instance, in split second, they managed to patent the head-up display appearing on the back of the vehicle, which just seems weird to me. But then what I wanted to say was about when it comes to precedent, because Electronic Arts famously, I don't think they patented it, I think they copyrighted it, use of the term fog of war. But that's been in use for like thousands of years, ever since, you know, war. So how are they able to do that? It's a common phrase. How are they able to say nobody else is allowed to say this because we own it?
It depends on whether they actually have registered the copyright for that and how many years that's been going. Because like I said, for copyright, you could actually have it as your next of kin inherits. So maybe somewhere down the line, someone did actually register that as a copyright, and it's just been sitting in perpetual copyright protection hellfire. That it's a term that you can't actually use.
Well, I mean, they didn't do it until Command and Conquer. That was their first use of it, and then they said no one else can do it because it's our thing. But literally everybody who played any kind of RTS or anything like that had been using it for decades prior to that, let alone actual war. So
it's interesting. I'm going to have to research a bit into that because I don't know the background and the context, the specifics of it. But from the sounds of things, it should be considered like laissez-faire, as an expression. It's not an expression commonly used because you wouldn't say it off unless you were that general in the battle, Band of Brothers. But I mean, it's possible that they found a loophole and they had a really good lawyer who was able to register some sort of trademark on it. I mean, lawyers come up with very creative ways to protect your trademark, your patents. I mean, I don't even know how Nintendo's and Pokemon's company is protecting these patents and going through with this court case. Because to me, it just seems like it's been in the public for a very long time. So how can you register a patent on a mechanic that's been around for, you know, years? So it depends on the creativity of the lawyers.
Hello, I had a couple but they're quick. With the kind of fair use for education thing, is that, say that I was to use something that was originally of US origin, is it covered by the origin of the work or by the country that I'm reside in?
So if you work in, well, if you're creating this in a UK university, no. It's only covered in US. So you can't use fair use in this country. It's not a doctrine that's used in the UK. So if you were based in the US and you were at a university there, you could rely on fair use. In the UK, I mean, you would be able to use a very, very small, tiny snippet, but it's still copyright infringement. And I mean, most universities would be very nervous of actually using any sort of like snippets, unless you actually refer back to that original creator and you reference them, like how I done with images. You always put like the URL underneath where you got it from. So it's fair use I wouldn't rely on in the UK.
Okay, and when you're saying about trademarking things and putting the TM or the other symbol after it, once you say you have your studio name and maybe a logo or something, and you then wanted to update that logo a couple of years later, do you have to go through this process of trademarking for every new iteration of a logo, even if it's like a small change or a big change?
Yeah, I actually had this situation where I was helping a charity create a board game, and the original trademark that she had registered looked like a child had drawn it. It was not professional, so my team then recreated it and redesigned a really professional looking trademark logo. But unfortunately she could not use it because she would have to do a reapplication and, you know, trademark that symbol to fall under this and that trademark. So you would have to do a new registration. So
Cool. So your advice would be, say that like you want to do this before you go into, it might be covered in this next section, but before you go into any kind of negotiation with a third party, would your advice be that you want to trademark whatever you've got, even if you're not sure about it at that time, and accept that you might have to go through it later? Or would it be that you should kind of just go through it once because it's either so expensive or such a pain to do that you want to kind of be sure about what you've got?
I feel like you need to be 120% sure that you really love your logo and you really want to protect it, because it is quite costly. I mean, I have the same problem where I'm like, do I register, do I trademark protect my logo? Because the logo for Agile Owl has gone through about 4 iterations. So it's kind of, it depends on you whether you really, really love that.
And how much money you've got.
Yeah, and how much money you've got, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Should we go on to the next section and then do more questions? Is there someone behind there? Oh.
I can just shout in if you.
Live stream.
Oh, sorry.
Remember, anything that is personal, do not say. Otherwise, it's not protected.
I was going to ask you, like, from a game dev perspective, because you've got the lawyer perspective and the game dev kind of creative perspective. You took your lawyer hat off and just thought about it from a creative person. How do you feel about the Power World and the Nintendo kind of thing?
I feel like it's a load of crap, honestly. Like, to me, it seems so stupid. I mean, when I first saw the Power World was getting developed, I'm like, how can you be that dumb? It literally looks like a replica of Pokemon. Like, how are you going to get away with this? And then, not even like 3 years later, slap bam, you got a court case coming up. Oh well, you should have thought of that. So.
Do you feel it'd be better if it wasn't developed?
Yeah, can't comment on that one, I'm not sure. I mean, I kind of feel like, I don't know if they actually had lawyers who kind of helped them to realize, hey guys, like, you are copying someone else's work. Is this really that creative? I mean, you have a ball, you throw it at creatures. That's literally a carbon copy of Pokemon. And then your creatures are fighting with you. Like, you can ride the creatures. That's the Pokemon game. They don't appear like, I mean, the patch note that they did in November, that actually probably was the best call that they could have done, where now the creatures, the companions as they call them, appear next to you. They're trying to work around the patent infringements, but I'm a bit skeptical how it's actually going to go, and a bit worried because I'm addicted to Power World, but if they run out of money, then what's going to happen to the game? Like, all that time and effort that you put in that game and leveling up, and suddenly the company goes bankrupt, and oops, there goes the game. So, yeah, that's just from my perspective. No one sue me, please. Okay, contracts. Yay, gonna bore you guys some more. Okay, so talking about perspectives, putting yourself in the shoes of the publisher and the investor, and then remembering why you're at that meeting in the first place. So what publishers want is they want to own the intellectual property. They want to monetize it and make as much money as they possibly can off of your idea. So they want something called exclusive rights. And if you have a contract and it's, sometimes they clause, how the lawyers like, we're pretty much a perfectionist when we write our contracts. It will specifically say in bold exclusive right, or it will say IP ownership. So it's kind of hard to miss. And they will want your right over your game, the game title, the components, the game engine. If it's a unique game engine, it's not Unity or Unreal, and it's your own game engine that you've created. They want the source code, the trademarks, the patents, everything, because their aim is to increase their intellectual property portfolio to make themselves more attractive, also protect you, because as I said, the bigger your IP portfolio, the less likely they're going to get sued, and it means that they'll be scarier, more intimidating, and they have more legal resources. So whenever you see that in a contract, you kind of want to do a double take, because that means that you lose creative right over everything that you have been working on. And your aim is you want to actually be able to retain ownership of your IP. So the best way to kind of counter give a counterclaim to a publisher is something called exclusivity right. Exclusive right and exclusivity right, very confusing, but they're very similar but different. It's a term that lawyers keep saying, it's very similar but it's different. You hear that all the time, it's annoying. But yeah, exclusive right is essentially the creator has ownership entirely, exclusively over all the intellectual property. Exclusivity is restrictions. So the creator still owns the intellectual property, but has restrictions on them. So they can only develop on certain platforms for a certain amount of time. So these are kind of, clauses that you can negotiate with your publisher or investor. And I'll explain why in a case study, why it's so important to actually get this right. Publishers also want revenue share, so obviously they're going to pay a development fee or a advance recoup. They want to get that back. So they're obviously going to go for the most monetization opportunities that they possibly can. They also want, as I said, exclusivity, so they always want to gain a competitive advantage. So they will restrict you as much as possible so they can gain an advantage, and you cannot take that game to anyone else or work on any other platform, but only do what they want so they can make money and they can gain an advantage in the market. What you want to also do as a developer is obviously retain that IP, but you also want transparency. So when you're working with a publisher, it's obviously all about building trust and building a relationship. So you want them to be as transparent as possible with you. So any revenue share agreement that you come up with your publisher, just make sure that you are able to see very accurate sales data that they hold, because you want to see that you're getting paid out what you owed. And I have seen a couple of clients come through where it didn't happen, where they literally got a lot of money just cut out from under them because they didn't ask for the sales data. So they didn't see that their game was making a lot of money and they should be owed more than what they got, but they only waited 2 years down the line and the relationship had already fizzled out at that point and turned into a lawsuit. So you want to try and avoid that. And also, developers want reasonable timelines, because I've had so many situations where an investor would be breathing down your neck and you have to have a game developed by this certain amount of time, because obviously they're on a money time crunch. Publishers also have investors knocking on their door to say, where is this game that you promised to be released? Like, what's happening? So as a developer, we want to avoid that scope creep, and we want to also avoid any features that the publisher says, I like this feature, let's throw it in there, because then that creates even more scope creep, makes your life even harder. So you also want to make sure that you have opportunities. If it's your game, your idea, you came up with it, and then suddenly you're going to give your IP over completely to a publisher, they are now the ones who own the IP. They get to decide what they want to do with it, and you've just missed out on amazing opportunities to make money on game merchandise, maybe create a DLC or a sequel, prequel to the games, but the publisher's like, no, let's just make one game and be done with it and move on to something else. So it's all about negotiation. Clicker, done that. Right, so negotiation tips. I mean, it's funny coming from a lawyer to say this, but lawyer up. I would just have a lawyer in your corner when, if you don't have the finances for it. Try and educate yourself as much as possible. to prevent yourself from going to your lawyer and saying, I stuffed up, I need help, and I'm about to be sued and go to court. You want to try avoid that situation. So contracts, they're specifically drafted and designed not in your favor. So I know I said ChatGPT is crap, but it does help to explain legalese. And I have tested this out just in case I messed up, but you know, if I'm telling you this advice and you're going to go ahead and do it, I need to make sure that, you know, it's soundproof. So you can take your contract, take a clause, and like copy paste it into ChatGPT and say, what does this mean? And it will explain to you what it means. And that's how you'll understand the legalese behind a specific clause. I mean, I was working on a joint venture agreement, and this is before ChatGPT, and we had one clause which was an exit strategy clause for 2 of the founders. It took my partner and I about 2 weeks to interpret 5 sentences. So, yeah, and it was a 100-page contract. Yeah, my life is so much fun. So they obviously, like when it's drafted, it's always going to be drafted in the publisher or the investor's favor. They just want to maximize their control over their money. They're only thinking about themselves. So you need to think about yourself here and educate yourself, protect yourself. Another thing to do is negotiate. Always negotiate, because when you first talk to a publisher, they don't expect you to just take the first offer, because then they'll be like, oh, you're clearly really desperate for this offer, so how good is this game? Like, how many more publishers have you seen before me? And you know, I'm kind of a bit skeptical whether to actually go through with this. A lot of the times, publishers have certain clauses that is open for negotiations, and that is mostly IP ownership or how they're going to split the revenue, and that is always negotiable. And they expect you to make a counter offer on that. They think, like, if you're going to take the first offer, then they're going to be like, but why? So you want to negotiate with them and come up with a very fair, mutual, situation. And one of the things that publishers have, they have something called internal thresholds. And you should ask them, when you're speaking to your publisher, ask them, what is your internal threshold for a IP ownership? How much of the IP do you need to own in order to make this deal go through? How much revenue do you need in order for this deal to go through? Like 99% of the times they will not give that information away, so you can ask for it. Another thing to do is boundaries and metrics. So you kind of have to set boundaries down and say, okay, this is what I want to do with the game. I want to make spin-offs of the game, derivative works off of the game. I want to create adaptations. I don't want these features in the game, or maybe I don't feel like I can make the game in 6 months. Like, it needs longer to develop, and so you also need measurable metrics. So goals, like this game needs to be developed in 5 months, or a feature needs to be developed in 5 months. The game needs to be developed in 4 years, or the game is going to reach 100 downloads as being one possible metric. And then obviously, avoid scope creep as much as possible. They're saying that as a producer, that's just not possible. It happens, and it's our life. This is a lot of information on the screen. It's gonna make you fall asleep, so I'm gonna say this very simple, so you'll remember this. Exclusive rights, as I said, that is the creator has the exclusive rights to own their own IP. They've created it. They get to decide what to do with it, how they want to use it. They get to choose what to do with it, how to distribute it. And exclusive rights is they're giving that right away to someone else. And that's what exclusive right essentially means. So if you ever see a clause like that, yikes. You want to read it thoroughly and make sure that you know what you're going into, that your IP is literally not going to be yours after this if you sign that contract. exclusivity rights, which is your counter to say, okay, I'm still going to own the IP over this, but I can say I'll be restricted for a certain period that I can't go to other publishers or someone else and sell this game. Like, I'm stuck with you for about 4 years. After the 4 years, I get to do what I want with my IP. Another thing you can do is termination rights, and that is an exit strategy. So every business deal you ever have, you always have an exit strategy, or you should have an exit strategy in case things just hit the fan. So this mitigates risk and makes sure that you still own your intellectual property. So it has to have a termination clause that says this is when the clause will terminate and it will end. And we call it natural and unnatural. So a contract has a natural death when all the conditions are fulfilled and both parties walk away having created a product that they said that they would create. And the contract ends there, it's done, it's dead. And unnatural is when there is a lack of funding on the publisher side or the investor side, or bankruptcy of the investor or the publisher, or death of the developer, or death of someone else within the team, or maybe both of them go bankrupt, or, you know, there are lots of different, like a list of all these material breaches of the contract to terminate it. And you should always have a reversion clause in there to say that if your publisher does need to own the IP over your stuff, then if they go bankrupt or the deal is done and there's a material breach on either party side where they didn't fulfill their responsibilities, that IP will then go back to the original creator. And that's what you should be doing. And this brings me to the case study of Burnt Out Cop. And this was created by, I think it was like 4 friends back in the 80s, the late 80s, early 90s. Dan Malone was one of the guys. He was quite famous for the comic art style back in the 90s. So he worked on this game, Burnt Out Cop, and that art, that style that you saw, that was his art style. He was quite well known for making a lot of games with this similar style of artwork. So him and a bunch of friends in 2002 decided we're going to get together and we're going to create a video game, self-funded ourselves. They had about $90,000 dollars to create this game. They started their own studio and it was called Infinite Lives. I think there actually is a game studio in South Africa called Infinite Lives now. But so their whole idea was a cop who was burnt out and was done with life, and it's his whole entire life's journey, and there's lots of blood and gore, martial arts, slapstick, Jackie Chan humor. I mean, it's a pretty vanilla game idea nowadays, but like back then it was very original, very unique. And Sega was even interested in buying it from the publisher originally. But what they did, which was their biggest mistake, was they gave exclusive rights over all of the intellectual property to the publisher, and not even a year later, the publisher ended up going bankrupt. And what happens when a publisher goes bankrupt is the intellectual property stays with the publisher, and then it becomes attached and evaluated, and the price for it is realized. And this game was priced at, I think, about $120,000 at that time, which was back then in the early 2000s a lot of money. And the developers, they couldn't buy their game back, and they really wanted someone to buy it, so they tried everything, tried every publisher, investor, but no one would touch it because this company is going bankrupt. It didn't seem very attractive. It's a financial risk. So they didn't buy the game. Infinite Lives disbanded. They just lost that idea. Millions of years later, it now costs only $1 to buy back, but the idea is not original, so it just never got developed. And that is one of the lessons that you learn is read the fine print and don't sign away your IP. And just, if you have to, fight for it and just come to an agreement with your publisher. Any questions?
Yeah, so I got one question about that really quick.
Yeah.
So maybe I should open the mic quick. Is there any exception to you recommending someone that they do give away all of their rights as an IP?
Wait, repeat that?
Is there any exception to where you would recommend someone that they do give away their rights? So like, as an example, if I create a game, and like, realistically it's unlikely that most people will create a very successful game, and if they do create a very successful game, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to take that to market to be able to gross millions. So if they had an opportunity where they could get someone that would publish a game for them, but in order to make that deal, they would have to give their rights away, after negotiation. Would there be a time where you would recommend maybe actually you should just give that away, because if you don't, you're probably not actually going to make as much money from that, I guess.
So this is the situation of negotiation where you know you're going to lose the deal if you don't sign away your IP rights. This is where you try and see if they're open to negotiation of putting a reversion in your contract to say, I will sell you my IP, fully entirely it's yours, but if you go bankrupt or this contract is terminated for material reasons, I get that IP back so I can go to someone else and get it developed for someone else or published for someone else. But again, if you feel that you don't want to fight for it, that's already ringing bells in my head that you don't really feel as passionate about your idea, and if you're not willing to fight for it, then why should someone want to publish it? So that's a hard question that you need to ask yourself. But if you feel that you want to build a relationship with a publisher and this is the first step, then take that first step. Just don't sell your IP or don't give your IP away to a game or an idea that you were building on that you were so passionate and love so much, and you really want to see this project work and you know it's going to work really well. Fight tooth and nail for that IP. Don't just give it away just because you want a relationship with a publisher.
Okay, sweet, yeah, thank you.
Hi. I was just wondering, for possible co-founders making a game or developing an IP, what would you recommend be the first legal, not moves, but action, but like what would you recommend first doing for co-founders or founders of a certain IP? What in a game compared to, like, I know film and TV and other things might be different legal-wise, but what would, in terms of games, what would your first advice and moves be for co-founders?
Firstly, an NDA. That's your first thing that you need to get sorted out. All of you have to sign an NDA, and it's a mutual NDA between all of you. Figure out who owns the IP in its entirety, or if it's going to be split up. For example, the art, the concept art, will belong to whoever's the artist. The game engine, if you guys are building a game engine that is unique, that IP belongs to the person who's building it. So that's one of the things I would recommend. Another thing that I would recommend is making sure that you guys agree wholeheartedly on your revenue share. 9 out of 10 times, if you guys fight over money, the relationship's not going to work, and then it will turn into a fight for that IP, or the game idea will disappear. But yeah, I think get an NDA first and foremost.
Would you also recommend, quite obviously, getting a games design document or a document down of like what the plan is and what the scope is, just getting it down?
I would always recommend that. So, I mean, like, as a producer, a game design document, you should always document your entire plan, your process, what you want the game to look like. because you can actually take that to potential publishers and just show them that this is your idea after they've signed an NDA, that's mutual. This is your idea, and for the publisher, they will have a better idea, like, okay, the success of this game, I think this is a very good game, and I do want to put my funds into it. Or I think even banks, when you ask for a loan, they will ask for proof of a game or concept. But in general, just as a game designer and game producer, always document. I know that we like to base our production on Agile, but don't always think that just because Agile project management means that you don't have to document, or you just forget about it, and it doesn't have to be waterfall, linear, and everything has to be documented. I've worked in a company where we didn't document, and the game was supposed to be built within 6 months. Our investor was hard on our asses, and that we went up Schitt's Creek, essentially. And we had to literally, after hours, sit down and document everything, and if you go back in time to document things, it's really hard. So have a game doc, a live one, and just iterate it. Always iterate it.
Thank you.
So I have a question in two parts about the relationship between a developer and a publisher or a parent company. In a situation where you do get an angry letter, is it the developer that has the responsibility of fighting that, and what level of responsibility does a publisher or parent company have? And then as a follow-up, if you then give the publisher exclusive rights, do you still, as the developer, potentially get the suit for the copyright infringement?
So famous words from a lawyer, it depends. So I don't know the context behind that question, but I'm assuming that's probably a situation that you're going through.
Just a
general question, okay. So as I said, it depends on what the contractor said. If the publisher has exclusive rights over that IP, then it is their responsibility as the first respondent, because we call them applicants, to apply to a court case to sue someone, respondent, whoever's responding to that court case or that suing. So it's first respondent would be the publisher, because now they own exclusive rights of the IP. But as the developer, they would be the second respondent, because they were the ones who created the IP. So they are still also responsible because they're the ones who created it.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Going back to exclusivity rights, what are some tips you could give us here about ensuring you manage to get a fair contract, or at least an equal contract for exclusivity rights?
So I would first focus on what platform you want to build on. So if you just want to focus on PC, just make sure you put that boundary down there to say, this game I'm only developing on PC. If you want it to be developed on, say, Xbox or PlayStation, I don't have the knowledge, or I don't have the funds to do that, so that would be the publisher would then have to step in and find you those people who can port, because porting is quite complex in and of its own, and expensive. So that would be the first thing. Know what platform you first and foremost want to develop on before you go into that meeting with the publisher, or if you're already in negotiations, talk to your publisher about that. The second thing would be your timeline. So do you only want to build on this PC and be restricted to only build on a PC for about 2 years, but you yourself want to build on different platforms? Then make sure you set that boundary to say, I will build on a PC, but after 2 years, I want to now build on an Xbox. And then the publisher has to help you kind of figure out how to get an investor in or extra funds in to actually find someone who can port. Unless you know how to port, then great. But yeah, set boundaries down quite early on your platform, your timeline, and then also your location. If you want to distribute, also talk about the geographic location. Like, are you only focusing on the UK, or do you want to focus on like a wider audience?
Thank you. Yeah.
Probably just got the time just for one last question.
Okay. So really, the quick ones. There's a few parts, but really quick parts.
Okay.
The first one is, all the things you told us is amazing, right? So if somebody wants a lawyer, do they have to find a game-specific lawyer? Or do they just find a lawyer? Because if you go into music, you have to find a music lawyer. So would you look for a game-specific lawyer? So that's the first bit. The second bit is, it can be very expensive going to a lawyer. Can you, when you first meet them, kind of cap them? So you can say, I only can afford this, right? That's the second bit. And the third bit is, if you get the contract, is it getting to yourself, you're talking about reading a small print, would you suggest to people they read everything that they understand and then highlight the stuff that they don't before they bring it to the lawyer, so they can bring the fee down at the front end of it? Because it's very easy to rack up a big bill when you're a small company.
Okay. So first question. I do recommend, if you're in the video game industry, go to a video game specialist lawyer. When someone says that they're a video game lawyer, they're actually a generalist, and it's contracts, IP, employment law. Like, we cover all various ranges of different areas of law, but we're generalists, but we focus on the niche of the video game industry. Historically, all the contracts in the video game industry is actually based on the Hollywood, the film industry, the music industry. So all the contracts are very similar. So if you do have a lawyer specifically that focuses on music, 99%, I don't know, probably 90% of the time, that contract will be very, very close to how our contracts are for the video game industry. Because historically, the gaming industry started like in the 80s, the late 70s, and they didn't really know how to draft their contracts. Well, the lawyers didn't at the time, so they base it off of the film industry because it's very close. I mean, we work a lot with filming companies. I mean, E.T., for example, when the movie E.T. was being developed, the game E.T. was also being developed. It tanked, and it was a really shit game, but I mean, you know, they worked together. So in answer to your first question, yeah, you can focus, like if you have a lawyer who has worked in the music industry or the filming industry, they will have the knowledge and expertise to help you on a video game. But if you can find a lawyer who's worked in the video game industry and like knows the niches as well, and as a lawyer, that really helps because then they understand the intricacies of the company. I know of very few video game lawyers, purely because our industry is like really becoming very, well, our industry, when I say as a video game lawyer, it's only become very popular since 2014, and we've suddenly thrown our title out there, oh, I'm a video game lawyer, but actually we're just generalists. But focus on someone who has worked in the video game industry, has the network, has the know-how, has worked in a studio. Second question, what was the second question again?
It was about capping the fees so you don't end up with a huge bill.
So you have this conversation with the lawyer first and foremost, if you ever have a meeting with them. I have like spoken to so many lawyers who do cap. Like for example, I know lawyers who have offered one guy about, all he had was £50 and he needed a contract drafted, and these lawyers were like, no problems, we'll help you, because the aim is to build a relationship. So if you don't have that amount of money, you could find lawyers who are willing to actually just help you out, because if they're in the video game industry, they want to see people succeed, they want to be able to help people build a business. And if they're going to say, oh, it's £5,000 to help you out with something, they're only in it for the money. And it's, you know, if you go for all of the big law firms as well, like you are going to be paying top dollar for, you know, top lawyers. Like, you know, I'm not going to mention names, but there are a lot of law firms that do charge a crap ton of money for like a simple contract. So yeah, focus on those two things. Have the conversation with your lawyer when you speak to them. And then my brain is tired. Third question.
The third question is basically, will it help if you kind of read the stuff and what you understand,
Yeah.
and highlight the stuff you don't, so you can bring it to them? They're not going to be offended when you say,
No.
I can only afford this amount of money, can you look at these points?
So that actually is an ideal client, because I've had many people come to me being like, I don't know what this contract says, can you help me with this? But I only have £20. And I'll be like, okay, this is going to take me a few days to actually read through this 50 page contract, but cool. So you do get clients who do, like, I don't like those type of clients. I like clients who educate themselves, and I want you to educate yourself. I want you to be able to read through the contract, try to do the ChatGPT, try like scratch the surface, try to figure it out yourself. Have questions to ask the lawyer, because that saves you time and saves you money, and also saves the lawyer time, because then they're not going to bill you per minute that they're reading a contract. Because I have worked in a law firm where I actually had to bill someone per second of a phone call conversation, and that was at one of the big 5 law firms in South Africa. That was like they're going out for the money. So educate yourself, protect yourself as much as possible. And then if you have the conversations with the lawyers, make sure that you read everything beforehand, because it saves us a lot of time. Like I said, saves you time, saves you money, and we can get to the crux of the problem a lot quicker. Because 9 out of 10 times when you come to the lawyer with your problem, they will take the contract, they'll have to read through it, and they'll be like, cool, we're going to have a follow-up consultation, which will cost you more money as well. So if you can just bang it out, even have the highlighted contract with your little notes, send it to your lawyer so they can review it a few days before your meeting. That also helps as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Cool. Massive round of... Oh, one more. Sorry, was it behind that tree? Yeah, got it. One more, and then...
It is just one follow-up question. You mentioned that developers should educate themselves on this area. Do you have any great resources for learning about the world of business, law, and...
I do, actually. I'm going to get my book. Sorry, Mommy. Come for my book, not you yet.
She's so excited now. I'm going to fail. I'll give them a treat later. I'm sorry.
Okay, so one of the resources which has really been useful is this book. It's Video Game Law by S. Gregory Boyd. So I don't know if you want to take a picture and share.
Put it on the Discord.
Yeah, but this is based on US law, which is a bit tricky. No one has actually published a game specifically focused on the UK industry. So when you read through this, take it with a pinch of salt when it talks about intellectual property, and do your own research. Don't rely on ChatGPT, please. If you can, talk to a lawyer, especially if it's a very complex situation. But like I said, there are lawyers out there that are willing to help. So if you only have like $10 in the bank account, then there will be lawyers who will help you. Okay. Cool.
Cool. Lovely. Right, massive round of applause. Thank you very much. Oh, cool. Cool, so that is it for tonight. So we've had questions. If you're not on the Discord and you want access to, we'll take a picture of that book and we'll put it on the Discord. Find a link to it on Amazon or something as well, I imagine, just to make it useful. We'll get the presentations, if that's okay, and put those, we'll share those as well. And yeah, so if you're not on the Discord, you can scan that. There's also a pull-up. If you're not on the meetup, scan that one, it'll take you to it. Last orders at the bar, so we're going to get one more drink and then be out of here by 10:30, and we're going to head down to the terrace to continue drinking. I know it's a school night, so we usually do this on a Friday, but yeah, yeah. If anyone fancies a late night on a school night, then we'll be down at the terrace. But yeah, other than that, sorry. Oh yes, right. Thank you. So Dee Dee is very hot on the socials now. So we're on Twitter, we're on Blue Sky. Oh, X. I feel like we might come off X, actually. I was thinking about this. Blue Sky, Facebook we're on, I think.
Not
kind of.
On
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is our main one. So yeah, if you see us, interact with us, comment on things, like and share, all that good stuff, because it just helps us. Yeah,
it helps
exactly.
us do more.
Cool. So yeah, that is everything. So thank you all again for coming, and see you all at the bar. Cheers.